I'm going to check what they're seeing when I sit here. I thought I let you guys all in. Hi, Ann. Well, that's reasonable. We can do this way, if I can control it. No, I cannot. I don't understand, and maybe Zoom does it differently, but that you should be able to control your. This one's more popular than the last one. We also have aftercare going on right now. Right. Oh, so this is what I do, and because we have two groups going on right now, I've led a group from 2 to 5 p.m. and I'm gonna know all these people. You guys go all the way to the end. And we semi had an eventful group. And I was on vacation last week. So if I seem distracted, I'm probably a little off. I'll pull myself back in and keep going. But we do run an intensive outpatient program. And again, the need has just been I can't even. At one point, I paid attention. We had 12 requests in 14 days. You're not supposed to average, and our requests are not easy to fill out. It's a form. Like you got to commit to filling it out. Like it's a 30-minute kind of deal. So we deal with these kind of things, and we deal with it every day, and in two different groups right now. And as you see young people coming in, we also run an aftercare program on Wednesdays where young people can find different level of support kind of thing. So I will say, just for anybody that's out there, we have about 15 slots that would be completely covered by this year's insurance. After that, it's going to go into next year, and deductibles and all of that stuff gets kind of messy. So it is a decent time. Just want to hit on the first week we did this, because there are the videos will be out there and available. This one's out there already. Dealt with parenting dilemmas, typical versus cause for concern behaviors, in depth into defense mechanisms, validation and invalidation, and then why some conversations are important for life or certain kinds of conversations. Since then, we've been hitting on cognitive regulation and family conflict, distress tolerance cycle. And last time we met, we were looking at behavioral regulation and choosing values and looking at things that matter. And today we're going to be talking a little bit more with ongoing pain and with how to deal with that, and also how to build change plans, which should be really practical. And even for those that have been through some of my stuff before, will actually be new materials that we don't always get to in group. And so the goal of today's, episode is kind of accepting reality. And accepting reality, the whole goal of that is that we can't eliminate all pain. It just doesn't go away. Can we figure out how to stop that pain from becoming suffering? So with that setup, and this comes straight from DVT materials. I'm not just waxing philosophical on you. This is pretty well researched from Marshall Linehan's materials. But I think we'd all agree that pain is part of life, can't be avoided. All right, we can't avoid physical pain, can't avoid emotional pain unless we go live in a cave, and then you're still not quite, you're not getting the emotional needs met. If you can't deal with your pain, you may act impulsively, and this is all levels of pain. Somebody cuts me off on the road, I don't deal with it well, I could end up in some kind of road rage battle, or mad later, continuing to be mad, or I didn't even know I was cutting somebody off and they got so mad that they threw a bottle. Like, you're driving like 40 miles an hour and somehow they think an empty bottle is going to get from their car to my car. But that stuff happens, and I understand that feeling. So that's acting impulsively when you can't handle whatever pain just comes at you right there. when you act impulsively, and this is I mean, obviously most of this is for your young people, but when you act impulsively, you may end up hurting yourself, hurting somebody else, and sadly enough, still not getting what you want. You know, I've got two that we've adopted, and one they got some trauma history, and honest to goodness, they will do exactly the same thing over and over, and somehow think that's going to get them, what they actually want. And it's the little one's very impulsive, and she knows how to get what she wants. If I grab it right away, I've got what I want, right? And it hasn't quite clicked in that there's going to be consequences from that. So, kind of overarching, that's why do we bother? I just throw that as a question. We could do this. Why do we bother dealing with pain? Other than to act impulsively, what else? What other reasons do you have to deal with pain? Why bother? Any of you exercise? Any of you exercise to the point of pain ever in your life? All right. Why? I mean, we want to play. We want to be in the game. We want to either stay in shape. We want to keep our hearts healthy. So we're willing. There's lots of places that we put ourselves in a situation that's going to cause pain, and we have to know how to deal with it. It makes sense to everybody. So I'm going to do an exercise, and I'm actually going to make you guys do this and let them see you. But this urge surfing is an activity we do in group. You guys have done this one, right? Yeah, a couple of you have done urge surfing, and it's a fun activity as far as I'm concerned, so we're going to try it. Do I have a volunteer? Sure. You'll volunteer?
She just nudged me.
All right, good. I was just wondering what that was under your on your belly there. What? Yeah. If you wouldn't mind, you come stand on the blue. Let's I want to put you back there so there's no chance of your head hitting anything. You'd stand on there.
Stand on it?
Yep. Try and balance on it. Look at him using the props and stuff.
Yeah.
All right,
Okay.
you got it?
Oh.
Sorry. He's working hard here right
This is
now.
a fun game. I'm not
Oh. All right, step on up to the surfboard.
Jeez. Really? How wobbly is it?
Oh,
Better.
it's better. I need it facing me though, so you can do it the right way. Really hope you don't pay for this later.
Me too.
Oh yeah, that's easy.
Look at that. You didn't even try on the first one, did you? Can you still feel, even there, can you feel the energy it takes to stay balanced?
Sure.
Like you don't get to just stand there and be perfectly balanced, right?
Right.
That makes sense. So
Yeah.
it takes some kind of level of energy. Thank you very much. Was that one easier than the blue one?
Yeah.
It appeared to be so from the outside.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just a natural
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much for stepping up and volunteering.
Yeah.
So, and I would, anyone else that wants to, but I want you to think about, we talk about our young people coming in and their pain level, their anxiety, their depression, whatever, is much like trying to stand on here, all right? Like they're not feeling balanced inside their own body, all right? And they don't know how to stay balanced. And then we think about the floor as being kind of unhealthy coping mechanisms, all right? So guess what? I'm not balanced here, but if I cut, I either don't feel it, or I get a sensation, or I do something else. Or, all right, I'm unbalanced, but you know what? If I vape, all right, I don't feel anything, or I feel something pleasurable, and so then I feel more balanced. All right, does that kind of making sense to people? Just thinking, because I have not been anxious 24/7. I don't know what that feels like, but I can imagine it feeling unbalanced in this state. These things we're supposed to represent, didn't even acknowledge them, but like life events still happens, all right? Like you've got the young person who, like, I can do this. I can get to school every day. I'm tired by the time I get there, but I can get there, all right? I can go to class. I can get to class. But then something happens, like somebody says something mean in the audience, right? Or they're looking at an audience. Their friend says something mean, or somebody breaks up with them, or they get a grade that they didn't think they deserved. Boom. You know, they fall off of their balance because they don't know how to handle that. This, and again, it plays with urge surfing in that to surf any urge, you have to actually let it flow through you. Because most people, when they have an urge, like, okay, so I want to cut, just to apply it to there, is I have this urge, and I will fight it, I will suppress it, I will control it. All right. Well, it turns out you can't actually do that with your emotions and urges and stuff. It comes out sideways, or it gets stronger, or you go do something worse. And so urge surfing is, how can I have that feeling? And feelings and sensations and emotions are not actually, unless you keep feeding them, they will dissipate. All right, there's pretty much, even on really strong emotions, if you're not feeding it, it's got a 20-minute cycle. They've studied this, they've tested it. But say our young people, when you're seeing them like this and unbalanced, it's because they're triggering it in some ways. And we've talked about some of those advisor things in their own heads, how they're interpreting what other people are acting and doing around them, all adds to it. And so this, I can't get rid of anxiety or depression. I don't know how to do it. There aren't magic pills for it. There are pills that help a little bit. But when we talk to young people, we talk about them like, if you've got a group of skills, if you can do some of these things, if you can go through the breathing deeply and recognizing, observing your thoughts and feelings, listening to your values, and then acting, all right, you've got a much better chance of dealing with life. It's not like it's easy. You know, I still have to actively stay present here. And guess what? Life is still going to happen. But you are able to handle life a lot better up here than you were down there, right? Yeah. On the other hand, with young people, I like to point out to them regularly that even when we have all these skills, we can still do things and set our lives up to be in a struggle place, right? So, you know, I got to admit, I'm a binge watcher of shows sometimes. You know, I watch until 1 a.m., I go to sleep, I get up. I am not as strong that next day as I could be, all right? Am I using unhealthy coping skills? Not yet. But who knows what that day or life is going to throw at me that day. In my case, it's my children and their struggles, and how do you deal with a kid who's, you know, first grade yelling at his teachers and stuff. You know, I mean, like these things that are frustrating that you don't want to have to live with, and I may fall into my unhealthy coping skills. You know, and my biggest unhealthy coping skill is cereal. Comfort food at, you know, 8 or 9 p.m., not a good idea. So you know, this is what I'm actively fighting right now, right? Let's say, I just said not to fight. I am actively switching from eating the cereal when I want to just going ahead and doing kind of like my basic 30-minute workout every night instead of that. So I'm trying to replace it, because if I get my body going, that's a healthy coping skill for me. That releases the frustration or whatever that evening came up with. And it does. It's amazing. You know, it's amazing how 4 kids talking to you all the time, I just can't process all that. You know, and so that just brings up a little bit of anxiety all the time because I'm trying to control it. But that's urge surfing. So we want both the concept of, can you just let a feeling go through you and find a way to keep yourself balanced? And that's an active process. It is not just I can white knuckle and go through it. I actually have to be doing something. And something in my world would be breathing deeply and slowing down. That's the first step in that process, and then recognizing it. And so that's urge surfing. And then the second is that I truly believe, and we've seen it successful in a lot of cases, that if you add in skills and you do things that help you and help you deal with these emotions, that you can build a stabler platform. Can't get rid of it completely. It's not just going away. You just kind of handle it differently and better as you move forward. And then you add those pieces together. So just like the slope that was going downhill where they struggled and didn't go, you know, left school once and then left school twice or whatever, can start going the other way. You don't just immediately get back to where you are. You go to school one day and then you go to school the next day, and just worked out a plan with a young person today. Like, truly the goal is for them to attend 1 hour all week at some point in time. Not going at all now, and I'm like, let's celebrate even if you get to 1 day of that. Because that's where we tend to forget, is that we like, no, we need them to get all the way to whatever goal is in our head, instead of like acknowledging that bit that they just did was really important. So that's urge surfing. Like to throw out some tools if you want them. Calm Harm is a great app for young people that you can, you know, if self-harm is an issue or something like that, this is a free app. You can put in things that actually work for you to calm down. So when you're in that state of a strong urge and you can't think about how to fight it, you can hit your app and get it. The same company has now put out one called, well, one for depression and one for anxiety. You look up this company, Calm Harm, and you'll find the other two if either one of those are helpful to you.
Excuse me, can I grab a pen?
Sure. Anybody else need one while I'm here?
Sure.
All right.
Thank you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I don't mind if they go home with you. They have our name. Somebody will see it somewhere. So that's for that. If your family is actively, a young person is actively struggling with suicide, then this is a more specific to suicidal ideation app. It's got your back. Again, you put in phone numbers that are emergency contacts for you, and it does it. You get in there, it immediately gives you, you know, nationwide hotline numbers and access and some of those things. So if that's a struggle in your family, the Got Your Back app is a useful tool. So now I want to do an experiment. I'm going to ask people that haven't done it before to give examples to begin with. So in this experiment, I'm going to say a few sentences. After you hear each sentence, simply think about what I've said and then notice what your advisor says about it. Your job is to just notice what your advisor does. There's no right or wrong here. Just notice what shows up when you listen to what I say. It might be best to close your eyes so you can concentrate. You guys ready? Hopefully you guys online are also closing your eyes and listening. I am weird. Remember, just notice what that inner voice, that advisor says. I am brilliant. I am perfect. I am broken. I am stupid. I am ugly. I am beautiful. All right. What did your brain do with that? What did your inner voice do with any of that?
Going up and down.
Like agreeing or disagreeing, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What did your brain do with it?
Yes and no.
Okay. So, but applying it to yourself?
Yes.
Sing? Did I get that right?
Yes, you have a wonderful memory. Yeah, that is acceptance, or trying to see what different situations, how different family members react was my, that's what was going on in my mind.
Okay. Fair enough. What were you doing?
Up and down and giving an example in my brain
About yourself?
about myself.
Okay. Did most people apply it to themselves? Some of you have heard this before. What did you do?
I was thinking it more if I was hearing somebody say it to me, and then if it was like the negative comment, I would be like, oh, that's really sad. And then thinking about if it was a positive comment, you know, oh, sure, that person was to you.
Okay. Good job.
I was thinking about how I feel like now at 56 years old, I've got a pretty good idea of who I am. So it's a lot easier if I know what I am. I know I'm not the smartest. I know all those things, right? But those questions at a younger age would have been much more, oh, I'm not sure, I don't know. I think those questions become less meaningful as you grow older and you become more self-aware. But as a teenager,
yeah,
those are tough ones.
I would agree. I'm hoping most of you can unhook from these kind of comments, but I still want to share the interesting part of this experiment, okay? And it's, do you remember my instructions? I just asked you to listen to some sentences I was going to say, and your job was to notice what your inner voice, what your advisor did with them. I never once mentioned that they were about you. In fact, they were about me. I was saying, I am weird. You're literally the first person to ever kind of nail that right off the first time. But isn't it interesting? We're just sitting here and I say some sentences and ask you to notice what happens, and your advisor, that inner voice, goes into overdrive. And I would fully agree that the young people in the room, it goes into overdrive, all right? And these are pretty blatant statements that we've set up, but they pick up from the, you know, social media, they pick up from TV, they pick up from, I mean, like, and if somehow, you know, horrible news about the economy applies to you as a person, you know, you're beating yourself up over all kinds of things. That makes sense to everybody. I know we talked about advisors in previous weeks, but I want to set up, we're still talking about the pain and how to stop pain from becoming suffering. And I ask our young people to write letters to their advisors. So every group that goes through asks or gets asked this letter, and I want to read some of them to you. Two of them are cherry-picked, mind you. I think they're just really powerful of explaining to the adolescent. But three of them are literally just from last week's group. They went through and these are the letters they wrote, the people that are in the group right now. Dear advisor, I guess you can be helpful in times of danger, like when crossing the road. But other than those times, just shut the F up. You have made life so difficult in more ways than I can count. I have been held back in so many relationships, friendships because of you. You say that I am unacceptable to this world and I will never be good enough for anyone or anything. Those thoughts make going about life unbearable. I hate the fact that I have believed and trusted everything you've told me for so many years. I don't want to go on like this with you, but I have definitely created some great barriers within the past few weeks to better my own mental health. I am finally beginning to show myself the love I deserve. Moving forward, I want to have a safe and healthy relationship. Using the Valuer and Discover, I want to focus on progressing in positive ways for my mental health. Sincerely, me. Dear Emmett, sometimes they name their advisors. It's a fun way to unhook from it if you just kind of make it a different person. You and I are not the same person. I've been under your gleeful heel for far too long. But now I've finally managed to sever you from my mind as to a leech from my back. You have helped bolster my self-esteem for brief moments, but the colossal harm you've caused myself and others will have to be forgiven. Even now, as I thought I read this earlier. I cast you to the ground like the bug you are. I see your toothy grin. I hope that I even allow myself to align with you, much less be victim to your arsenic lies. From now on, you will be nothing more than the stain of a memory lurking in the backmost of my mind, a disgusting reminder of what once was. No longer will your twisted tongue cut into my soul. Goodbye. Young people are very, very creative also in how they think about things. Dear advisor, you've kept me out of trouble in the past, and I'm grateful for that. But I'm going to be honest. These past few years, you've acted more as a hindrance than a help. After being subjected to your criticism for so long, I'm finally coming to realize that life doesn't just consist of extremes. I'm not hideous or brain dead. I can be good things too. Moving forward, I'd appreciate a little peace and quiet. Please just let me live my life without the incessant negative thoughts. Even now, I'm sitting here comparing my letter to others. Stop that. Enough with the pressure. I'm allowed to exist just as I am in this moment. Listen to your values. If I'm lost, fall back on what matters to me now, not what mattered to me in the past. For now, I think the healthy thing would be to take a break. Use my discover to act without judging myself. I'm doing my best to work on myself. So I'm sitting here and be proud of the progress I've made and not how far I've fallen short. Good job, me. You got this. Sincerely. These two did a little more of a creative way of explaining the struggle that they were in. Tired of people disappointing me. Tired of being let down time after time. Tired of feeling on edge, waiting for something I'll know and I'll never know. Tired of being told things will get better because what if they never do? What if I'm just screwed up? Tired of the what ifs. Tired of feeling like failure. Tired of messing up time after time. So don't tell me to just get through today. You liar. You shameless, stupidly hopeful liar. So yes, I'm tired. For God's sake, leave me be. That's a young person who could recognize what it felt like to be standing on that. A beam of light, miles and miles away, with laughter and squeals, dancing and friendship, a hope, a smile, a happy ending, something she would never get. As the beam of light showing through the tunnel got smaller and smaller, it seemed as if a cap or a lid was being placed on the sunshine, while her monsters dragged her further away from hope. A pit of black, tears, cuts, and blood, sadness and misunderstanding. This was her tunnel, and she was the only one in it, the only one left. Just smile, they said. You have no reason to be sad, they always whispered under their breath. And she always wished she could be the one saying that, not the one in the pit. But she knew her monsters would never allow that. Could you guys feel the pain in all of those letters? All right, even the ones that are actively moving uphill or against it are like, for years, this has been in my head. This has been going on. I think that doing this work has driven that home more than I kind of knew it was there, but now just how many years and when it starts. And I have a 10-year-old and I'm very consciously paying attention. She is incredibly fond of herself right now. So I don't think it's there yet, but I'm going to keep watching for it. But there's just a lot of pain in there. So I want to talk quickly through pain. What's the difference between pain and suffering? All right. Pain is normal and everyone experiences emotional or physical pain. And what I'd love is if anybody wants to, your packets have some of this material in them. Pain is part of life and cannot be avoided. Pain is temporary and will come and go. Anybody else have any other way they think about pain?
I think the pain being part of life is true. I mean, again, if we were happy all the time, then it wouldn't be happy, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that is life. That life is going to be having ups and downs. You just don't want those ups and downs to be too high and too low.
Extremes, yeah. So you would argue that all of us feel pain.
Absolutely.
Do all of us have to feel suffering? Do we all have to deal with suffering? And again, this is from DBT, but suffering is common, but does not have to happen. Suffering can be avoided. Suffering lasts longer than pain. Suffering is what happens when you do not deal with or accept pain. Always do a fun little example or discussion with the young people at this point in that, what happens if you scrape your knee up and then don't do anything about it? Gets infected. All right? It's all infected and you still don't do anything about it. What does it do?
Get your leg cut off.
All right. Good job jumping to the leg cut off. Some of the young people know that it could become death if you leave it. And I think I need to really look up this fact, but I'm pretty sure in World War I, more people died from like infections and other things than the actual wounds that were caused. All right. So they had this immediate pain, clearly a shot or something else, a stab, and it essentially turned into suffering because nothing could be done to handle it, or they were stuck out there, or there weren't supplies or something like that. All right. So using that same analogy, when you think about pain going into suffering, how would you think pain could turn into suffering? Well, first off, does anybody disagree that that you don't have to have suffering? Did I say that right? That had way too many negatives. All right. So I'm going to go with the phrase, suffering is common, but does not have to happen. Does anybody disagree that suffering has to happen?
If you don't have the tools to deal with the infection or to deal with the pain, heal the wound, then suffering would be inevitable.
Okay. If we have all the tools, can it be avoided? All right. Would like to note some parents are like their young people. All right. So how does pain turn into suffering? Essentially pretending like everything is okay when it's not. And this is, you know, we talk about the physical piece of it. This is much more the emotional side of things. Ignoring or bottling up your emotions. And in one of these sessions, we've talked about a little bit about the spectrum of stuffing your feelings versus sticking your feelings versus feeling your feelings. All right. And so if you're bottling them up or shoving them down, or as we talked about in urge surfing, if I'm just going to fight this so much, I am bottling it up. Thinking or talking about a crisis or difficult event over and over, not asking for help when you know you need it. That is a really interesting thing to see in even a 6-year-old when they won't ask for help. I'm like, all you have to do is say, will you help me with this? And I'm right there helping you. And they would much rather go into a ball, you know, cry, get mad. It's really interesting. So ignoring problems, focusing a lot on trying to change other people, which is essentially blaming other people, blaming yourself or other people for difficult situations, not talking about your emotions, not letting yourself see the positives, only thinking about or focusing on pain. Does that make sense? Can we see how pain can turn into suffering if we choose, if we don't have the tools, or, and that's why those, you know, a young person saying they can actually recognize this having gone on for years and not having dealt with it. Like literally they've gotten to suffering before we even know about it, much less been able to help deal with.
Or you've educated them to suffering.
You've what?
You've educated them about suffering. I think a lot of children that are struggling with emotional issues don't even know what the word or the feeling of suffering is.
Yes.
And so then once you educate them, then they're like, oh, yeah, I guess I've had that for a while.
I had one young person who literally said the best thing that came out of being in group was not that they'd learned any skills or anything, but they had a language with which to talk to their parents about what was going on inside. You know,
Yeah.
I just thought that was an insightful answer. Any questions on the pain to suffering? I want to scoot on into kind of, again, DBT is all about these dialectics of these extremes and somehow finding a way to walk the middle path between them. All right. And that's also with your young people. What extremes are going on in their life that we have to figure out how to help them move towards closer to a middle path. All right. And so a huge one is blaming yourself or blaming others. Frequently at this point, I actually know all your children and I have things, but what do you guys blame yourself for? Somebody, what does blaming yourself look like? Yeah.
Gaining my COVID 19 pounds.
Yep. Yep.
I blame myself.
Well, Some easy ways, if your kid's struggling and they have a biological issue, you passed on your genetics. This is my family. Sometimes you look at your own family tree and say, I probably shouldn't have, planted any more roots. And yet I did, so I need to live with that. What else? I think blaming yourself is when your young person screws up or messes up and you take it personally. I will say there's a nice out knowing you've adopted a kid who's got some trauma. So when you get the call from the principal that they have literally in kindergarten grabbed and pulled the fire alarm in the school building, you're like, well, all right, yeah, that's my kid. But I'm not gonna. I didn't have anything to do with it, and eventually I'll be able to blame myself for some of his behaviors. But at the moment, it's not been long enough yet. But can you see how that can go to extreme? You can beat yourself up. You literally can turn, there is pain. This young person is struggling in some way, in shape or form. And now I'm turning it into suffering about myself. All right? All right. And so then the other extreme is blaming others. What does blaming others look like? This one's usually easier.
It's your fault.
Who do we blame? Culture. Oh, anybody else's.
Parents' fault, anybody's fault, yeah, anybody else's fault.
Anybody else's
Yeah.
fault but mine,
Mine.
right? Yeah.
I didn't do it.
I have 2 adopted children as well,
Well, they didn't get it from me. However, after parenting them for, almost 2 decades, you kind of say,
Yeah.
Yep.
that's what I kind of go down the blame to myself, changes like, what happened to my parenting skills? How did my daughter, elope 1 week after high school? And all these things, life coach set up, everything ready to go, and left and didn't speak to her for a week or 2 or 3 or 4, and now it's been 2 years. You say, that wasn't part of the plan.
Right.
So I've gone through and had to go through that grieving process of
Mhm.
seeing kids graduate college and high school. Where's mine? So I've gone through that, and I think a lot of kids they've been suffering and don't really know the word suffering. They have so much shame inside they just can't.
Yes.
realize that out.
And I'm asking you guys because you're who's in the room blaming yourself, but young people, I'm in awe at how many young people blame themselves for their parents getting divorced. Very rarely say it, but all of them that I've ever talked to feel like they played some part in it. So they are, it's almost a natural human trait to blame ourselves for some things around us. What's that big thing that we all like to blame that's out there in the culture? You said culture, but social media. We'd all like to blame social media for all these problems, right? I've taken this view of technology, like people are the same thing with all these new technology kind of things. Like cars are a neat invention. But I look back, even when I was dating in college, got home from a date, we're getting ready to watch a movie, and it's like 10 p.m. and my answering machine back in the day was blinking, right? I'm going to ignore it because I'm fairly focused on the girl. And she's like, are you going to check that? I'm like, no, it's highly likely it's work, and I can't do anything about it till 8 a.m. tomorrow morning, right? She didn't make it 20 minutes. Like, are you going to check? Like, she made me check it. I'm like, all right, let's go list it. It was work. I can't deal with it till 8 o'clock. You know what I mean? But so just saying that this new technology leads to that kind of mindset of being fixated on it or being like that just catches your whatever is not necessarily true. It's not our phones that are like, we have traits and we have to learn how to kind of deal with those. Now it gets harder in some of these situations, I would say, but just blaming that answering machine for this fixated thought, it just doesn't make any sense, right? Does that make sense? So this is one of my fun questions, but how do you deal, what's the middle path between blaming yourself and blaming others? Can anybody see it?
Identifying the part of what you're responsible for.
That's part of it.
Oh,
Sorry.
oh, that big word right in the middle.
Acceptance.
Yeah.
Levels of acceptance. Like,
You know, what I would have made out accepted 5 years ago. Okay,
And
I
and
accept it.
and DBT actually even calls it radical acceptance. Like this is not normal level of acceptance. This is not just everyday kind of acceptance. This is a accepting reality no matter what reality is. And I've given you this stuff because sometimes you're gonna have to process a little bit more of it as you go. But trying to change things that you have no control over leads to suffering. All right. You waste your time and energy when you try to change things that cannot be changed. All right, and so that's important to then figure out what can be changed. And this goes to your part. Which part can I take ownership of and change, and which parts can I not? So what I cannot change, I can't change the past. I can't change other people. I can't change rules or laws, not at least in the short term. Death, divorce, or loss. Who my family is. What I can change. All right. My skill use, how long I focus on things, who I spend my time with, my own decisions, my attitude. Radical acceptance means accepting what you cannot change so you can spend your time and energy on the things that you can change. When you stop fighting what you cannot change, you can accept reality. That makes sense? It makes sense. It is not easy. It is not an easy process. All right. Before I've got a step-by-step for you in your packet. I'm pretty sure you've got radical acceptance. Much like validation is not saying I'm okay with this behavior. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. Radical acceptance isn't giving up. All right. It's not just agreeing that this is the way things always have to be. All right. It's not approving or liking the situation. It's not weakness. It's not failure. And it's not that you have to put up with whatever this harmful situation is, because that's what happens in say a victim mentality or domestic abuse or something like that. Is they somehow think there can't be any possible change to this, so they just start trying to live with it. All right. In the sex trade, what that turns into is dissociation. All right, like I step outside my body. And that actually happens to a lot of people when you're stuck in a situation you don't feel like you can have any control over. All right. Radical acceptance is not that. Radical acceptance is this is the way it is today, and I somehow want to do something differently tomorrow with it. Just in case you're wondering where you sit on that one, I got some parent experiences thoughts. I think that, in fact, I know they're in your packet. I never went through that when I was his or her age. He or she shouldn't feel this way. He or she isn't working hard enough. This is just a phase. I must have done something wrong as a parent. This will never get better. He, she shouldn't be acting this way. He, she's just lazy. So I'll tell you, if you're dealing or had dealt with any of those kind of thoughts, you probably need to practice some radical acceptance. All right. So then you flip it over, keep going. Here's some example of thoughts that lead to acceptance. I cannot control my son, daughter's emotions and choices. My role is to support and help. I can offer to help. I can help him, her use skills. I can deal with this. I want things to be different, but I can't force things to change. So with that, I hate going to speakers who say things like, you should try radical acceptance, and then don't tell you how to do it. You know, that happens all the time. I've been very frustrated with speakers. I'm like, yeah, that seems like a good idea. How would I do that? Nothing. Crickets.
DBT skills, I'm not sure.
So dialectical behavioral therapy. I think it's online, but somewhere in this packet, the models I use are DBT, which is dialectical behavioral therapy, and DNAV, which is discoverer, noticer, advisor, and valuer. And that is based on ACT, which is acceptance commitment therapy, but it's for adolescents. So all of this material, other than my examples, don't blame my examples on the authors of those two models, but all of what I'm sharing with you has come from two very evidence-based models. So here's a list, and again, having a list does not make it easy per se, but it does give you some steps that you could do and try. So observe that you're questioning or fighting reality. So it shouldn't be this way. Remind yourself that the unpleasant reality is just as it is and cannot be changed. This is what happened. Remind yourself that there are causes for this reality. Acknowledge that some sort of history led up to this moment. Notice that given these causes and the history that led up to this moment, this reality had to occur just this way. So my father passed away in February, and the whole family, like, you want to think the doctors could do more, or that they're somehow, like, we know, like, a stent was giving out. Well, could they go in and fix that? Could they empty, and all those questions are legitimate questions, but part of my own radical acceptance is, like, he started this process 12 years ago, when he had the 4 bypasses, and when they told him, like, you have to change your diet, you have to do some of these other things, and that was not the choices he made, right? And so we just have this path. Does that mean it makes it any easier to accept that he's gone? No. And I think the biggest challenge to acceptance, I'm still not fully there, but is that it's not just one time. Like, if my kid's suffering, if they're struggling with one, it's not just once, right? It's not just like, okay, now we got to class, now we're good. It's like every class. It's 1,000 different times that we've got to come back and reflect on this radical acceptance. So 4, practice accepting with the whole self, mind, body, and spirit. Be creative in finding ways to involve your whole self. Use accepting self-talk, but also consider using relaxation, mindfulness of your breath, going to a place that brings you acceptance or imagery. That's kind of like the old Calgon Take Me Away kind of commercials. Like, okay, sometimes you just put yourself like, okay, I'm thinking about all this, and now I'm going to go relax myself immensely. Remember, right. And that might be lots of different things. I can remember at one point knowing I had to deal with something I very, very much didn't want to deal with. So I chose to do it right before I was headed off to work with some younger kids. That may not be everybody's happy place. I love that. And so I went from horribly mad and upset to my happy place. And I could accept it afterwards. Didn't make whatever it was any better. It just made me accept it and know that I had to move on at that point. 6, practice opposite action, which, just to highlight, is a DBT skill. So you can go look up opposite action and get more details on this, but it's essentially what it sounds like. List all the behaviors you would do if you accepted the fact, then act as if you had already accepted the fact. Engage in behaviors that you would do if you'd already accepted. Cope ahead with events that seem unacceptable. This is one, in a really, really simple way. Again, our trauma young person, like, if they don't want to go to the door or whatever, every step in between can be stretched out, right? So we'd be ready to go. We thought we had them completely dressed. We're like, all right, grab your shoes, let's go to the car. You got a half an hour battle getting shoes on, right? And you would let them play or whatever. And so coping ahead was, all right, until you are literally ready to pick up your bag and walk out that door, you don't get to do whatever it is you want to do, right? And that actually works. So he has shoes on. They get shoes on before they get anything in the morning, that kind of thing. So that's a little bit of coping ahead with events that seem unacceptable. Imagine in your mind's eye believing that you don't want to accept. Rehearse. Rehearse in your mind what you would do if you accepted what seemed unacceptable. 7, attend to your body sensations as you think about what you need to accept. Allow sadness or grief to arise within you. Again, and this is going back to urge surfing. You have to let the emotion arise in you for it to dissipate at all. So if you're just fighting it or holding on to it or ignoring it, it's not going away. It's just getting bigger inside. And I want to argue that it's the same with the young people. So just telling them to calm down or just suck it up is just teaching them how to suppress and put it down and not actually ride the wave of that emotion. But I would just tell you, it's hard on the outside to ride somebody else's wave of emotion at times.
Is that like the having a really good cry, you can feel better afterwards?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's exactly what that is. Acknowledge that life can be worth living even when there's pain. Do pros and cons if you find yourself resisting practicing acceptance. Just talked with a young lady today who, what we talked, she's like, I don't really know, I can't get my mind to figure out what matters to me in a lot of these situations. And I'm like, well, that might be when you use an outside skill like pros and cons. Make a list, and then just do whatever that list says. So she was like, she gets stuck, that's what it was. She makes a lot of decisions from that emotional mind place. And then they're not the best decisions. And I'm like, well, just do pros and cons, and then just literally just do the one thing that you know, that ends up on the bigger side. And so that's kind of what it means to use a skill in that situation. Oh, all right. Last bit, I've really started working on that truth can come in many ways. It can come from evidence-based, it can come from stories, it can come from other things. So I want to share a couple of stories with you. Jewish folklore has it that and these are about radical acceptance, had it that King Solomon once searched for a cure against both pride and depression. He charged his wise men to invent him a sentence to be ever in view, and which should be true and appropriate in all times and situation. A phrase that has magic powers to make a happy person sad and a sad person happy. Kind of going back to your, like, we don't want these extremes, either of these extremes. They meditated for a long time and gave him the following advice. Make yourself a ring and have thereon engaged the words, this too shall pass. The king carried out the advice. He had the ring made and wore it constantly. Every time he felt prideful, happy, sad, or depressed, he looked at the ring, whereupon his mood would change. Abraham Lincoln noted about this phrase, and this too shall pass away, how much it expresses, how chastening in the hour of pride, how consoling in the depths of affliction. Radical acceptance is accepting that this too shall pass, and allowing that to humble your pride and console your affliction by reminding yourself to appreciate and celebrate every passing moment. So, any questions on radical acceptance? I'm kind of changing directions on you here in a second. I do think it's a really important piece in it. You know, go back to the grief example and having to accept it in all kinds of different situations. You know, it still comes up that usually I'd call my dad when I'm in my car. So that still hits me on a regular basis. But he had this so the Steelers, when they were on national TV, and he got to watch them, and the Steelers are my football team. If they were on national football team and they won, I guarantee you within 5 minutes of the game ending, my phone would ring for him to congratulate me. Because clearly they won because I'm wearing the jersey. And the first time that happened this season was really hard. So it's not like I've accepted. I mean, he's in a better place, quite frankly. But it's still these things that I have to live with here. So I am going to switch directions on you a little bit and talk about building growth ladders and how you would go about changing some things and moving from that unable to stay stable place to a more stable place across a lot of different areas. This would be one that if you go and get the link, and we'll send it out, the packet that I put online has a ton of examples to help with this process. So if you guys are on the packet, so building growth ladders. Growth ladders. Oh. Can we just say I was not 100% with it? Now you will remember it though. Growth. Building goth ladders. I've got enough young ladies in the room that have built some goth ladders. All right. So this is the principle of exposure therapy. All right. So a core kind of probably one of the most accepted psychological practices is exposure therapy. All right, like you can't find anybody that's going to argue that that's not an effective technique. So if you have a phobia of riding buses, you can build this plan of how to get there. Like I can look at pictures of buses. I can walk around buses from 100 yards. I can move closer and closer to them. We worked with a young lady and we're like, all right, you go stand at the bus stop for a while when there's no bus there, because you're just imagining that a bus would be there. And then once you're good with that, you go stand at the bus stop when the bus comes by. We don't want you to get on the bus right now because that's too big of a step. All right, so exposure therapy is finding the level of steps that you can handle and keep yourself moving forward. Does that concept make sense to everybody? Because it applies, it's an interesting, like when we're scared of something or phobia, you think about a young, somebody that's got a phobia of snakes. There's highly likely some kind of situation that came up in their childhood and snakes caused this fear, and then it just grew and grew and grew. All right. Amazingly enough, the only way to get over that is actually to confront and expose yourself to snakes, which is the one thing you're like literally trying to avoid. All right. So in many of these situations and with many of the young people that we work with, it's literally getting them somehow finding a way for them to be willing. Because that's the only difference between being exposed to the snake the first time and then getting over the exposure is the willingness. I am willing now to do this process. And so finding ways to get young people to be willing to confront the things that are getting in their way. And that can be defense mechanisms. It can be the avoidance that has come from just biological fear for their whole lives. It could be the fixed mindset that's in place that there's no point in trying or effort that's put in. What's the point of that? And so taking all of those is how do we build a ladder to confront something that we think needs to be confronted? So that is the core of the process, I guess. And so the ways you would do it is you just start making a list of the situations, places, or things that cause the struggle, all right? And it's going to say anxious or anxiety in here, but it literally can be almost anything. I actually put together a lot of these, and you guys can, I need my own copy of my own packet. If you turn to, it doesn't have a page number, but it says building a courage growth ladder. I like how this concept can be applied not just to fears or challenges, but it can be, can I add something to my life that will make it better? And again, I don't know of any psychologists who think they can get rid of anxiety. I do know of a lot of them that believe if I can teach bravery, if I can teach assertiveness, if I can add these skills to anybody, then they can move forward. And so I think it's just as important to build courage ladders, and I think I got the R there this time, growth ladders, as it is to building those exposures to things that they're not getting done, school, homework, those kind of things. And so balancing those out. And you do that by creating this huge list of steps that go into whatever that thing is, all right? And as many situations as you can possibly imagine, all right? And so this would be, the first step is obviously finding those things that you are struggling with. That's why we go through defense mechanisms, why we go through a lot of those things. So you got to find something that you're going to confront. And once you've made this list of all those things that are challenging, you got to give it some kind of rating, all right? Like it is really hard for me. So it's an 8, a 9, or a 10 for me to think about speaking in public. That's a normal one for a lot of people, right? And so you can use this for that personal growth of being able to build a ladder, but you got to rate those fears, all right? Because once you've been able to, or again, not just fears, but I want to build courage. It's going to take me courage to do that. I want to learn a skill. I'm going to have to be able to do this at this level before I can move on to the next step. All right. And so but what would be super big and hard and challenging for you? You rank them. What's something I might be able to do today or tomorrow, and what's something that's actually going to have to push me? So you can look at it in a lot of different ways. Break it up into smaller steps. In this case, we just say brainstorm 10, but brainstorm as many steps as you could take that would require you to do whatever that thing is. All right. Then you rank those. Just like you would rank your fears and what you're concerned about, you would rank brainstorming those steps from hardest on a scale of 0 to 10 based on how much, whatever it would take. Again, these are not, if they're phobias or if they're, I'm afraid of responsibility, or one of the first ones we did in this room was a young lady who couldn't take a compliment. So we literally developed a hierarchy of exposures to compliments. Like, and some of them were like, we will put compliments and just tape them to the refrigerator, or put a magnet on the refrigerator. So you're not actually having to hear someone say it to you, you're just seeing it as you walk by. And making an exposure list to accept compliments, because their advisor was so mean that couldn't be let in. So we couldn't just do it with, well, you're a good person, or really because they wouldn't accept it. That would just cause a battle and a trigger, and they would go downhill, even on a good thing. So we had to build an exposure ladder. Does that making sense there? Like, I think this can be applied to so many things. All right, here's a way you can make something easier or harder. Length of time. All right, so if you're, got a social phobia or a speech phobia, I can remember when I learned how to public speak, they would give us like 3-minute extraneous talks, but you had to build towards giving a formal talk kind of thing. So it's little steps. Distance, standing 20 feet from a dog is easier than standing next to one. Looking at a picture of a needle is easier than holding an actual needle. Continue to break things into smaller steps. Number of ways. And again, you've got to get to the point where your young person can take that next step and do it with some support. All right, so I can't tell you what the exact size of those steps should be until I, dug truly into your particular child. And sometimes they may need to seem ridiculously small just to build up some momentum, just to build up, like, I can do this one, I can do that one kind of thing. I think, I have actually worked with a young person who didn't leave his basement except to come to session or something like that. And the steps that we had to put into place, like, can we order from the outside of a restaurant? Can we order from the inside of a restaurant? The number of steps you had to put in there. Finally, pick a specific goal. If your goal is to use a needle, list all the steps you would take in order to accomplish that goal. So you're finding a way to get as many possibilities out there as you can. And when you're setting a goal, it actually needs to be specific, needs to be measurable, needs to be achievable, needs to be relevant. And that's the point where a lot of schoolwork gets frustrating to young people, is it doesn't seem relevant. All right. And then it needs to be time limited. It can't just be that we hope this happens at some point. So some examples. I would like to meet a friend for a drink 3 times a week and spend 30 minutes talking to them. I would like to achieve this within the next 3 months. While looking for a job, I would like to call 3 prospective employers each week and ask them about any vacancy. I would like to be able to do this within the next 3 weeks. I would like to learn how to challenge my negative thinking so that I do not always jump to conclusions. Instead of worrying about things all day, I would like to allocate 20 minutes a day writing down all my worries and try to manage them. I would like to achieve this by the end of the month. Do you guys see how specific those are? It's really an interesting process to get a young person to write a specific goal, especially if they're avoiding responsibility or they've learned how to avoid responsibility. Because then, sure, I'll do that sometime, not within the next 2 days or not within any kind of reasonable. And so I want to act like that's easy. That is not an easy process to get to. And that's where you might have to figure out what the steps are going to be in between to get to some of the actual goals that you are hoping for your young person. Not SMART goals. I'd like to feel less anxious. I'd like to stop avoiding things. I would like to do the things I used to do. All right. These are kind of the things like when you were talking about a young person even understanding that suffering exists and that they're turning pain into suffering. If I don't even know that as a concept, I can't move away or towards it, quite frankly. I just fall into it. Again, the scale is so not actually important other than that it means something to the young person. We have the young people fill out every single day like their suicidal ideation, and they give them numbers. A 6 to young person might be the same as a 9 to another young person. It has no bearing whatsoever on decision making, except if a young person says they're at 9 and they know 10 is the like max, they're saying something to you, right? And when you see that 9 turn into an 8, what does that mean? They had 3 less thoughts? I have no idea what that means, but they somehow feel like that 9 turned into an 8. And then if it keeps going down, that's great. I don't normally get cold in here, so if I'm feeling any kind of chill, I'm expecting some of you are really cold.
I am really freezing. That must be right. Oh.
It was right there, yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, you know, if your goal is to make a new friend, you would start building a ladder like this. Tell a classmate about your weekend. Ooh, that sounds like an 8, because boy, that's even given some opinion or something like that. Saying hi to a classmate in school. Is this concept making sense to everybody? I thought it would. The biggest challenge that I have seen is that it's hard to come up with ways to move towards whatever you're trying to work on. That brainstorming process is really hard. So I did not print them all for you, but there are, I want to say 13 or 14 pages of examples hitting on different both fears and values and defense mechanisms. And the defense mechanisms one is getting built by other counselors with me. So like I go talk about that, and then I ask them to come up and brainstorm some ideas. So I've put in a huge list of examples so you can go in and like, oh yeah, and what does this apply to my life? Because I think that's the piece I feel like gets missed a lot of the time, and it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time to figure out those things that would be relevant to you. All right. So planned exposure. Now that you have a ladder, pick one of them to start with. On the fear ladder, start with the least scary situation, so a 2 or a 3. And again, repeatedly enter that situation. So I would say at minimum, you're thinking 4 times. Even if it looks like they handle it okay the first time, you should do it 2 or 3 times. Because your goal is to force that wave to be ridden. All right? So they're there, even though it looks like they could white knuckle it and make it through it. That's not successful. Successful is going in there, it brings up some anxiety, I take a deep breath, I go on, kind of thing. All right. And then you move to the next school. I think when it's a serious or real issue, sometimes we want to move that process too fast. And it would probably be better off to go slow and add a lot of very minimal successes than try to jump to too big of a step. Expect that you're going to have problems. And this is anything. So as a therapist, I did in-home therapy for a lot of years, and I could be meeting with a young person and be like, they're going to blow this evening. It's coming. You could just see it building up in their eyes and how they were talking. And I flat out knew, I'm like, I could keep this on a level place right now and get through this session. They're still going to blow, but I could get through my time with them. The deal was I was carrying a pager. I was the person that family was going to call if that kid blew that evening. So I'm going to have to deal with this anyway. And so at some point, expect that challenge. If you know this is going to be a challenge, and again, call this bold. This is not walking on eggshell parenting. This is say, I'm going to prepare myself to then enter this fray to some extent. I am not saying to do this 100% of the time, all the time. I'm saying pick those battles and then go into that and confront that, and then both of you go take a break, or everybody go take a break, kind of thing. Stay in that situation for a long time, as long as it takes for your fear rating to cut in half, or your struggle rating to cut in half. If you're bored, you aren't scared. All right, so young bird, like, this is just boring to do another algebra problem. All right, well, you're not really struggling with it then. And you should be able to do it, in which case it's willfulness or defiance, or it's something other than anxiety or depression that's getting in the way. Start small, practice, get help, keep it up, use your imagination, get creative with it. Tracking your progress, you know, writing it down. We gave you, so if you flip back, I didn't get page numbers on this thing, but building growth ladders around. Show that to you guys. You got this in here. It's essentially an attempt to give you a whole game plan. So what's my goal? List out your steps once you've brainstormed them somewhere else. And then the back of the page, you know, walks you through tracking it. This week I'm going to try. This is what I predict will happen. Again, this is the coping ahead process. Again, we're trying to mix radical acceptance in here with actually attacking. So we're assuming or helping our young person practice radical acceptance, that this is going to be hard. Try to predict what will happen when I face this fear. Some thoughts I might have. And again, we're going through observing thoughts and feelings beforehand. Listening, and the value is here, I want to move forward and challenge this goal. If I get through it, and then some feelings I might have, and this is, again, I will say young people don't have good words for the mess of emotions that they go through. All right? And so they're feeling all kinds of things, and it ends up getting all put into one box, where it might actually be 10 different boxes, you know, and they end up moving it all into one. I would say as a, you know, as I came out of my youngness, when I shut down all my emotions, it all kind of felt like anger. Everything felt like anger. I can now distinguish grief from anger. I can distinguish, you know, frustration from, you know, there are tiers to it. But you got to start somewhere by describing or observing and describing. If I get through, I can reward myself with yada, yada. And it literally tells you, at the very least, challenge yourself 4 times. Pick the dates. Challenge rate starting was a 9. Challenge rate at the end, you know, was a 6. So now it was an 8 and then a 5, and now it's a 6 and a 3. And then the 4th time we go, you know what, I was at a 3. I probably could have handled that by myself, but even after sitting there now, I'm at a 1 or a 2. Your young person actually has to know what a 1 or a 2 feels like. And that's where I'd argue, if they're still in the midst of that whole balancing act, they don't even know what a 1 or 2 feels like. Their normal is 4 or 5 or 6. I think I hit on that one. Any questions about building a step ladder? And again, I would recommend, we'll send out the link, but looking at that packet, if you happen to be like I am, a visual learner, again, I've included in that packet, like, literally walking through step by step. I've given you kind of the bigger strokes, but if you're like, I need more detail on this, you can go. They did an amazing job with this. I can't take credit for it. They did an amazing job. And then there's at least 10 or 15 pages of examples for specific you know, phobias and fears and values and that kind of thing for you to get in there and look at.
I would
Yes.
just like to say thank you to you and your whole staff, but this has been a really great program, and I've sat in 4 classes, and of a parent of a child living with high anxiety. This information that you provide is great, because you feel like you're at the blank wall, and having some words that you can put down. They can do very well in therapy, they can do well, but at home, we're trying to implement this. Well, but you know, no way, and you can have. So I'd like to say a lot of hard work is you put in your staff. I'd like to say thank you, because that's a jump start.
Good.
And I also can blame you and say, well, I didn't think about this, but I got this class.
And I want to finish up with this sheet. So bringing, if anyone has paid attention, the first class was called Breathe. The next class was called Observe, Listen, and then Decide. And so putting that all together, you've got it up here. I've got it on the screen. I'm going to show it a couple ways, but beginning of this school year, we had a young person go through, and the school wanted me to come in like actually the day they were going to let the kid back into school and meet with them, and they were like, really, we need some help how to use the language that he's thinking through. And so kind of created this sheet to try and put bold all together for you. All right. So B is the whole breathe and breathe deeply and slow down. There's a couple of things there, but on your sheets, try 3 breathe skills. All right. And so this is what I give out to counselors now. So if a young person shows up at their office, here's what I would do. I'd hand them the sheet. Have the kid try 3 breathe skills, square breathing, 5-4-3, urge surfing, whatever they use, and write down what they tried. Have them recognize, circle their emotions. So they're observing their thoughts and feelings. And that's just going to be circling them and then connecting it to some kind of like, oh, there's an actual emotional need here. And then what's happening inside of you that you needed to take a break? Because if a kid is at the counselor's office, they are taking a break. So can they get that down into words of some kind? All right. And then go in and have the conversation. Well, write the answers out. When this happened, so whatever they were going on in class, I felt, make sure they write the emotion. What I need is to be understood and getting that need met for me. And so I actually, writing out answers to things is a breathing and slowing down exercise. And so, having your young person, if they're old enough to handle a sheet like this, having some of them around and they're struggling, let's go through this and then we'll talk kind of thing. And that's actually what I tell the counselors is have them go through it and then they can have access to talk to you. Because a lot of them want to get in that office and just talk. They don't really have anything to say. The counselors tried every possible technique they could think of by this point, and they're just in this bad loop, and it's just an avoidance loop, all right? And so this at least gives them a process. So then you move on to listening to your values, all right? What do you want to turn your energy toward? Listening to your values means discovering what's important to you in life. What matters to you about, this is fill in the blank, school, math class, whatever. How do you want to behave? So this in this case, it's targeted to why you left whatever this thing was that you left. But what do you want to behave? How do you want to behave towards yourself? And again, we're always trying to push that self-acceptance and self-compassion in the midst of struggle. How do you want to behave in this situation? All right, then you go on to deciding on actions and act or doing them, all right? Am I ready to go back to deal with the issue, which is, do I need to talk through what's going on with somebody right now? All right, in this young person's class, I actually like the whole idea, well, should I do another breathe skill? All right, read slowly through the Greek alphabet below. This particular young person had gotten so good that reciting the alphabet backwards, the actual alphabet, all 26 letters backwards, had worked for quite a while. They'd gotten so good at it that it really wasn't as calming. Like they could just whip through it. So I'm like, all right, let's make it a little tougher. Let's do it in Greek. I haven't heard how much that worked, but I know that saying the Greek alphabet is about the same thing and it's a different set of words. So that is my hope, to put all of this bold together. I think if you came before, if you didn't, I have a couple of them, but we try and for seeing back there, it's a process because there's an immense amount of ways that you can breathe deeply and slow down. It's not just one. There is not one. You have to find the ones that work for you. It's a process because there's multiple ways that you can observe your thoughts and feelings and unhook from those things. Listening to your values, you have to know them, and then you have to do some ways to get through them. And then there's different ways, opposite action and just act and growth ladders, that you can decide on actions and start taking them. So that's why it's a process. I have 4 or 5 minutes. If there are any questions or anything you'd like to know, I will close down. I think part of acceptance is that maybe I can't deal with all of this. So, like we have a whole team around our young person, and we're still contemplating getting ourselves in with somebody who can do medications, because it's still gotten to that point where we're not sure just behavioral stuff is going to manage this, or it's not letting us do the behavioral stuff and have it be effective. All right. So in that case, if your struggle has gotten too big, there are resources, not a lot, but there are resources out there. That's my team. This computer is super slow. This is what we've hit on. And again, a different way than that sheet to put all this together is that our hope is that we're moving our young people towards an open and authentic self where they can feel their feelings, where they're calm, curious, connected. And you have to go through those defense mechanisms. You have to deal with what's the point, the existential stuff, and all the emotions that have just gotten so big and so strong that they're masking what they really feel. It's all the advisor realm, all right? Got to just engage that discover or shrink what they're feeling and keep moving towards things that matter to them. Say a lot of young people, there's just so much out there that they're not doing a good job of picking things that matter to them. Like I should just do this, or I should do that, or I'm looking, I don't know what it is, but they're not picking things that matter to them, or it's hard to support that, so it doesn't get supported kind of thing. And so really finding things that matter to them are vital. I think that's the end. I'm going to see if I have any questions from anybody online. Did anybody have any questions? Otherwise, we're going to call it a day. I honestly have no idea if this is even working.
I have a real quick question.
Sure.
Are you going to be offering this series again?
Am I?
Yeah.
Two things. One, we videotape these things, so they're online. I am going to move. I'm going to move to. I do a parent support group on the first and third Wednesdays of every month. Up to this point, it's always just kind of been who's in person in my office kind of thing. And so what I'm going to do moving forward is pick a topic that's a little smaller than an hour and a half, like maybe 20 or 25 minutes, and start that third week's parenting support group with that and stream it and tape it. But there's a lot of topics that I don't even get a chance to get to in group. I mean, 5 weeks seems like this huge amount, like we should be able to do everything, but we can't. I don't get to sleep. And sleep is a topic that honestly I think would eliminate 20% of the kids that I see if they had sleep patterns that were consistent. And so that's what I'm going to do in the near future, starting in January. I don't know who asked that.
It was me.
Was that okay?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna break it down and do it in that situation on some different topics until I either run out or it makes sense to come back to some of this material. And I'd love some feedback on what format would have been better. As we tried, first time I did it a couple of years ago, we did it 5 weeks in a row, about killed me and the audience by the end. So this time we decided to try and put 2 weeks between 4 episodes, and I don't know what registering me for things means anymore, because there were, even today, there's 180 or 190 people registered. Not all in person, but there's probably 20 engaged in some way, shape, or form. And some of them were like, they registered this week. So I'd love some suggestions. I'm going to do it in the spring in Iowa for a church that wants to do it for their community that a friend of mine is the lead pastor for. So I'll be offering it in certain doses, but any feedback on what formats are helpful or useful, I'm willing to listen. I'm really hoping at some point to give a parent refresher course for people who have been through the program and just be able to revisit it for a Saturday and maybe get more targeted with what you need for that day.
Well, I think the every other week was really good because it's enough time to go home and think about it, and committing to like 4 or 5 weeks in a row might be challenging. So
It was.
it allows you to kind of figure out your schedule and try to carve the time out.
That's what I would say, and I'm hoping that maybe just once a month and streaming it so you could either be in person or watch it and have a list or know what. I don't seem to have any questions on there either. But
I'm going to do your ladders
okay.
and try to review the material in 2 weeks on a Wednesday.
Hmm.
In class because there's a lot of information.
Mhm.
And every other Wednesday was my goal tonight, so that's going to be my ladders. And I'm going to work with elementary school kids. Oh, all this, like you said earlier, I'm kind of new to DBT. I mean,
There's some good apps.
there's a lot of different skills you're teaching here that could apply to, you know, those of us, not just with elementary and adolescent children, but
Every human.
getting along with others in life and deep breathing when the cup comes across the highway at you. For example. So all those different
Oh, if you need to leave,
information.
go ahead. I'm gonna show off the rest of the packet for anybody who stays in the room. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Did you say you have those shiny papers?
you may have one. If anybody.
You have another one?
I got a bunch downstairs. Give me 10 minutes. Who said that one? Is that you?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pull up and show you this packet is like, I just wasn't gonna print out 40 pages for everybody.
On the website.
It not yet.
It will be, that's okay.
She sent out the links for today. If you got that email. At all, there's a link that said packet.
Yeah.
Um,
Will it go? Will it take?
so what I'm going to do is, if you've seen the bold parenting.online site, I'm just going to attach all 3 videos or 4 videos and packets from there. The videos are all on, will be on, we have a YouTube page or whatever, and so there's playlists there. Eventually I'll get to my website. This computer is really can't handle this much processing.
That's a lot of
It, yeah, I mean, you betcha. I will get there. Those of you that are online probably already saw the packet, hopefully, and I'm going to say sayonara, so maybe my computer will work better. Maybe. All right. Unless I stop recording, it won't let me. All right. You guys here, I can show you the packet on there. Personal computer worked. I couldn't get sound. I was going to do it from it today, but I couldn't get sound to come out of it. I'm like, that doesn't make
I
any
think I
sense.
joined the only session I joined online was that one session that did not go well. And I'm like, forget it, I'll just go to the in person.
Yeah, I apologize about
Oh,
that.
that's okay.
That was
No.
a hard mess.
Teach me.
All right, so like it's 40 pages long.
Okay.
So what you guys got today, and then it dives into, again, examples of fear ladders. With this one, phobia of dogs, needles, panic disorder, social anxiety, post PTSD, the whole manual.
Yeah, wonderful.
And then at the end of it, you've got examples for building growth ladders, humor ideas, perspective taking, like things that normally aren't thought about as ladders, but fear of germs, social gatherings, talking to people I don't know. So like a whole list of like, okay, which of those makes sense? Fear of throwing up. We have somebody in group right now that's dealing with that one. So perfectionism, confronting uncertainty, perfectionism. And then some, and we don't have a lot of examples yet, I'm still working on this, but how to actually hit some of these defense mechanisms if you're a young person, or if you think that's there, and making yourself an exposure ladder to how to deal with those things.
Okay, so the link that was sent out will have it.